Okay, so let's start. Okay, first I would like to introduce our special guest for this sketching nights. As you know, during this extreme situation of COVID, we've started these sketching nights. Five teachers, five professors from Tec de Monterrey. The idea is just to join this group of teachers and invite the community just to have a good time drawing every Wednesday. But then we just wanted to grow this passion, and we came up the idea to invite someone else. And we was going to have a Spencer during the semester, but unfortunately we couldn't because this situation. But I offer him the possibility to make this special activity for our community, and he accept. So I'm very happy to introduce you to Spencer Nugent, and of course the idea is to have a good time, to learn some nice tips and tricks from the best. I think Spencer is one of the best sketchers, at least nowadays, and it's for me an honor to having you here, Spencer. So I just also want to present the other colleagues. We have Claudio Monterrubio, is a professor from Guadalajara. We have also Alan Garcia from León. I'm following the order of my screen, but of course Carla from San Luis Potosí also. I can see you, but she's always supporting us in the managing and the details. And Ruben Vasquez from San Luis Potosí also. So we are this group of professors. Spencer, please, this is now is your time. The idea is to just to enjoy and learn from you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? All right. So I tend to go very quickly when I draw. So if I miss something, just let me know in the chat. Just a little background on me. I've been doing this for, well, since 2008. Started a website called ID Sketching. That turned into Sketch a Day. I've worked as an industrial designer professionally for about 15 years now. Found myself doing UX and strategy work. I've done furniture, designed homes, interiors, environments, and all that stuff. So the common thread there, of course, has been visual communication. So that's really important to me, is to be able to maintain my fluency, my ability to communicate visually. I was telling, I forgot who, I think it was Alan, I was telling, I speak a little Spanish, but I don't practice enough. So it's kind of like that with drawing. If you want to be really good, you have to commit to practice every day. So with that, let's get started. Rodrigo mentioned that we're gonna do some sort of thermos today, and I like to do a lot of my design work when I'm exercising. So I was thinking about the idea this morning, what it could be, and now we're gonna go ahead and visualize. But I'll show you my thought process, and we'll create a presentation page with some important, I think, key elements. Now, as we draw, I want to say, feel free to make your own design. You don't have to make it exactly like mine. I'm going to talk about the key parts of a presentation and a sketch so that you can make it look good. All right. So let me switch over here. You guys can see me in the top corner just in case. Okay. I always warm up. I don't know if you guys do, but super important. You wouldn't go run a race if you didn't train, right? You wouldn't lift weights unless you warm up a little bit. So it's the same thing. And just to be clear, this is going to be duplicated, but well, maybe not. So when I'm drawing, I draw with my shoulder, okay? Shoulder, elbow. These are the two parts that move, not my wrist. You don't want to see any of this happening unless it's something really small. By really small, I mean, you know, maybe 5-10 millimeters in size. Maybe use your wrist, but everything else we want to keep this kind of motion going. All right. So let's start with some lines. And there's two ways to do this. One is just go for it. All right. The other way is to put two dots on your paper, something like that. Let me zoom in here. And now I can try and draw as straight a line as possible. I missed that one. Now the tip I want to give you here is if you do have the dots on your paper, don't, it's a lot like life. Okay. Don't think about where you are, where you've been. Focus on where you're going, and it makes it a lot easier. Okay. So think about where you're going, look at that point, and then draw that line. All right, just believe in yourself and go for it. Now it is a lot harder to do these with the dots than it is without. So I usually warm up without. Okay, just another tip. When you're holding your pen, I want you guys to try and do something different tonight. It's going to be uncomfortable. So instead of holding your pen like you're writing, okay, I want you to back off your pen, maybe halfway up the barrel. Like I said, it's going to be very uncomfortable, but it's going to force you to draw with your elbow and your shoulder. If you're not very comfortable, that's okay, but just try that at some point. So let's go ahead, finish this page. When I was a student, I used to do maybe 10 of these pages every day. And I would just sit and watch TV and just draw straight lines. If you have, so this is approximately, let me think, this is A4 size roughly. If you, again, want to push yourself, use bigger paper like a A3 size. I'm going to be drawing on A4 just because I'm used to it, but my tip for you would be to draw big. And you can use the other side of your paper. This is just regular printer paper, the type of paper you would buy in an office supply store. So nothing special about it. The pen I'm using is a Papermate Flare. I do have a link on my website. I'm going to try and get it live tonight. It will tell you about all the materials I use. So right now I have markers, pencils, even the cameras I use, information about all of that stuff is there on the website if you're curious. Okay, so let's finish this page out and then we'll move to the next exercise. All right, so there we go, something like that. Now you want to do as many of those pages as you can a day. It'll help train your muscles. One thing I like to pay attention to is how physically warm my muscles feel. You know, am I generating heat as I'm drawing, because that means I'm working hard enough. Sorry, let me just open this door. It's getting hot in my studio. All these lights and cameras. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is circles. Okay, so for a circle, I'm doing what's called ghosting or hovering over the paper. So I'm not drawing. I'm just telling my muscles this is what I'm going to do. And then I can draw my circle. Okay. Just like that. And you want to fill the page with as many circles as you can. You can overlap them. You can use as much of the paper as you want. The goal is one nice continuous line. I've been already drawing today, so this is a lot easier than if I just woke up. But here's an example of one that I would consider to be good. That's okay. This one needs some work. And the reason for that is I'm paying attention to the overlap as well as the proportion. I guess this one's a little bit off, but I do want to try and achieve somewhat of a consistent dimension on these circles, okay? So there's an example of what I'm looking for personally when I warm up. So I'll just finish this page. And yes, I do these every day, every single day. Sometimes multiple times a day, depending on how I'm feeling. All right, so the next exercise I want to show you, and let me think, should I show? Yeah, I guess we're going to be doing ellipses today, so I'm going to show you this one. It's a really hard exercise, but I'm going to show you anyways. So what I want to do is draw a square on my paper. Pardon the noise in the background, I was 3D printing something. So draw a square like so on your paper as best as you can. It's really hard. Let me see if I can do another one here. Okay, something like that. Now the goal is to draw a circle in this square. Now I want the circle to touch these 4 points on my square, so it's going to be very hard. Got to pay attention to this. All right, that one's off. Okay, that one's better. I think I'll use that one. All right, so let's use this one. And I want to make some observations here. And then we'll jump into drawing some ellipses to warm up as well. And then we'll move into the exercise. So if I divide this square into 4 equal parts, we notice that there are points of tangency where the circle touches the line. In addition to that, if I divide the square on the diagonal, like so, you'll notice that the circle intersects or crosses these lines at a certain point. So I can take, let's call these A, B, C, D, all right? And if I were to just draw in a 2-point perspective, a square like this, and divide it from corner to corner first, because now I know where my midpoint is. All right, something like that. Then I can take from this circle and put that information on the plane. All right. So now I'm going to take these 4 points, A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I can take these points here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I want to pay attention to about we're just going to estimate, right? So if I divide this, you could divide it into 4 parts. I like to say it's about 1/3 of the way in. All right, so if I divide it like so, it's about 1/3. So I can do the same thing here. All right. And let's take this Sharpie. This is where I'm going to cheat and use my wrist for you guys. But just showing you, that's how you draw an ellipse in perspective. If you understand why something looks the way it does, it makes the how very easy. Okay. So the next exercise we want to do is we're going to draw some parallel lines. You could make them converge as well if you wanted to. Maybe we'll do both sets. So I'll do some lines that converge, and then we'll do some parallel lines as well. And my goal here, I'm just rotating my paper. Another tip, rotate the paper to be at the position that you can draw the best. Very, very important. So here, what I want to do is draw, let's say this is a 5-degree ellipse. I want to draw ellipses that get bigger and bigger, at least this way. Okay, I want to open those ellipses as I move down the page. Now the challenge is I also want these ellipses to be consistent and touch the line, so that's hard. All right, you get better at drawing by doing the hard things. And I probably skip some steps here. I could probably do one like that. Let's see, maybe one like that, and then like so. But you want to get in the habit of practicing like that. Here's another example where we're going to change the shape, or rather the width, but also open the ellipse. So I'm going to do one more of these, and then we'll revisit this series of ellipses as well. All right, so here, let's see. Oh, I drew the wrong thing. My apologies. Actually, let's do this, because I think I can use it. I don't want to waste the paper. So something like this, okay? And if I were to draw my ellipses, like so, then it makes it really easy. Actually, let's go this way. If I draw just a few lines on a few of these ellipses, some of you, if you watch me on YouTube, you may have seen this before. But if you want to draw a car, you can just do something like that. with those ellipses. So when you do your warm-ups, you're actually practicing, at least this warm-up, how to put your ellipses in the right place to draw a car. All right, so don't feel like the practice is just boring or it's not going to help you. It's really important to put these things in your head so that you can draw anytime you want, anywhere you are, and really just, you know, blow people away. All right, so that's one example. Another might be, hey, we're doing thermoses tonight. Well, we have a series of ellipses like this. So I could pick a few of these. Say maybe that one, maybe draw a little bit bigger there. You can come down like so. And maybe the base on this one's a little bit bigger. So then I could just connect these lines. All right, and now I have the foundation for some sort of thermos. If I wanted to add a handle, you know, I can do that as well off to the side. And I would have the foundation or the beginnings of that shape. So the practices we do are important because it's a way for us to, you know, try things out before you're ready to do your real drawing. Okay, I'm going to switch to some marker paper. And I want to show you a technique I use when I'm thinking of ideas, how to come up with your concept. All right, so let's talk about 4 things. So the first is form. Am I drawing on the right side? Yes, I am. Okay. So the first is form. And then we want function. And then we want what's called context. And I'll explain these. And then we want to add the details. Okay, so this is a way you can tell a story of a product. So the first one, form, is, you know, what is it? Okay, is it a cylinder? Is it a cube that's stretched? Is it a cone? You know, is it a combination of those things? But really, form and function go together. Okay, so function is, what does it do? So what does this thing do? In the case of the thermos that we're going to be working on today, I need to answer those questions, and you answer those questions through research, or if this is a self-directed project, maybe you are the user and you decide this is for me. So examine your life, maybe circumstances, situations that this product might find itself in, and then that's going to help you decide what it is. So it kind of works like this: form, function, they all work together. Okay. Now, the next thing is context. So where does it live? All right. Where does it live? Very important question. Is this something that's meant to fit in a backpack? Is it meant to just be on a desk or in the kitchen? Is it meant to be in a certain environment, at least aesthetically? Those are all questions I'm asking myself in my head when I'm designing a product. Okay. And then where it lives, or rather, I would say an outgrowth of form. I hope this is the right side. Anyhow, an outgrowth of form is the details. Okay, so the form is like the big picture and the details are the small picture. So these all work together, but this is kind of my process as I'm designing something. All right, so let's just make a new line or new space here. So I need to answer these questions. What is it? Where is it? If it's a thermos, I'm going to make some critical decisions. Okay. So as a user, I wanted to, maybe I shouldn't have drawn this line here yet, but I'll just write it here. So I wanted to keep warm. Okay. So then the question in my head is how long? You know, because if it needs to be kept warm for a longer period of time, now I have to think about, okay, how am I going to reduce the amount of heat that escapes from this thermos? Or maybe there's a power source, okay? Maybe there's some sort of power source. Of course, we don't want it to leak, so no leaks. In terms of the shape, that's something we can decide. It's pretty open-ended, but you could also argue that maybe manufacturing plays into this as well. So I'm gonna go with just a cylinder. I'll make that choice right now. So I'm going to focus on cylinders. I want us to be able to keep warm, have a power source. Is that removable, right? Is that removable, yes or no? Right, I get to decide that. No leaks, I might ask myself the question, okay, how am I gonna keep it from leaking? Is there a seal or a gasket? So these are just all the questions that go through my head when someone comes to me and is like, hey, I want you to design a thermos. Before I start sketching, I do all this work. So I want you guys to be thinking about your own concepts. What is it gonna look like based on what it does? And also we'll get to this next step of where it lives in just a sec. Okay, let me think. Function. I think that's simple enough for now. I just want to keep my coffee warm, and I can say let's go for all day, right? I want to do it all day, and I have ideas on how to do that. So context, where does it live? For me, I'm gonna say a couple options here. It might live in a car, right? It might be a bag or backpack. All right, in certain situations, it might be on a desk or counter in the kitchen. Okay, and we'll get to the details here in just a sec. I'm gonna actually tack on function as part of the details because sometimes, there might be a functional element like a switch. If this thing is powered, for example, that's at least where my head is going. There's a switch, maybe there's a base. Let's see, maybe there's a temperature, setting or reading on this thing. So I'm just kind of thinking about all these things. All right. So if it keeps my coffee warm all day and the power source is removable and I'm trying to prevent leaks, I'm not really sure how, but I'll just say some sort of gasket, okay, or double seal. I don't necessarily have to show that, but I can. 1L, double seal. All right, so that's enough. I'm going to take this paper, put it to the side now. Okay, so take this paper and I'll put it to the side. So the reason I keep checking my paper, just so you know, is marker paper has one side that lets you draw on it and the other side doesn't. Sometimes it's hard to tell because I got separated from my pad here. So in case you're wondering. All right, so let's start with some concepts. First step is thumbnail. So as I'm drawing, I'm thinking in, and yes, form, we're using the same word, but the first step is form, okay? And we kind of know what that is. It's a cylinder. So that's what we're going to start. The next is we're going to divide that form. Okay, so we're going to break it into parts. And then the third is we're going to beautify that form. So there's almost a parallel here, right? You have form and function, kind of covering this form and divide portion. And then the beautify is kind of like the details. And all of these things together gives context, or we can add context rather. I'll just say plus context equals story. All right, so these things are all happening at the same time when I'm putting together a concept. So to start thumbnailing, you might start with just some simple sketches. Like I said, it's a cylinder. So in a two-dimensional way, we can just jot down some ideas. And yeah, I think this is the wrong side of the paper. I'm fairly certain. Give me just a sec, guys, or I'll have to switch my pad here. Yep, I was drawing on the wrong side. So I'll finish that paper, but actually I don't need to finish it. I'll just jump over. Okay, so I might start with just some front views and top and maybe just some quick ideas, okay? And I'm trying to keep in mind as I'm doing this, my story. So I'm using a cylinder and I want to keep this warm all day. How am I gonna do it? I have a power source and I'm thinking about where this thing might live. So if it lives in a car, I might have different opportunities to power this thing than if it lives in the kitchen And then how does that work, for example? So a couple cylinders, and now, so form, meaning here's the overall shape, and I've already jumped to divide. Okay, so that line is just a division or split. Okay, now I have a lid, and maybe this is a base, but what if the base is removable? Okay, so if the base is removable, maybe show an arrow here, and then I can describe what that is, shade in, and now I have essentially just a rough plan for what I might do. Okay, very, very rough. Now, if I'm doing this in the perspective view, I want to make sure it's, you know, working in the side view. So I'm trying to break this into similar parts. You can see there, there, and there. But also someone needs to hold this thing. So I have a couple options. If it's small enough, like this can of Coca-Cola, then I may not need a handle. But if it's bigger, right? I guess that's another question I didn't answer in my initial requirements is, you know, how big, right? Is it a liter of coffee? Is it half a liter? Is it a deciliter? I don't know, but I need to make that decision. I'm just going to say it's big enough to have a handle. All right, so if it's big enough to have a handle, then I can start sketching in some ideas for a handle. But I'm the type of person that doesn't like a handle permanently affixed to things. So I'm going to suggest that maybe this handle is removable. So how do you show that? Just a quick sketch here, thumbnail. Again, notice how I'm holding my pen. All right. Pretty far up the barrel. And I'm not concerned right now about getting this perfect. This is just capturing the idea very quickly, as you can see. And here is the rest of the mug. All right. Like so. Very, very simple shape. Maybe there's a little recess or jog. And if I need to show that, I need to explain something here. So I'm just going to circle it. Now have an arrow. And if I want to show what's happening, then I can do a slower drawing, maybe something like this. We'll just add a background. This jog in a line usually means there's more to the shape, but I'm cutting it off at a certain point, okay? So here I can show maybe this ring, you know, snaps on or down. You can draw an arrow here. For example, this actually gives me an opportunity to talk about something. So a lot of times when you're drawing, you don't need a lot of marker and digital stuff if you're just explaining your concept. So for example, in this instance, I can put a lot of information just by using line weight. So here's a shape. Okay, here's another shape. Is one of these shapes on top of the other? Not necessarily, right? Not necessarily, because if I draw this in perspective, what could be happening is something like this, right? It's not exactly clear, right? So it was a trick question. This is essentially the same thing as that. Now, if you want it to look like there's an overlap, that's where you use line weight, all right? So like that. Now one shape is in front of the other. So don't always assume that you're using the right symbol because it could be misinterpreted, right? It could be like that. Now, if you do want one of these to be on top of the other, let's see, let me modify this. I'll do something like this. Okay, so now what I've drawn here is more representative of that intersection. And when I'm doing line weights in my sketches, I like to have 3 line weights. So a thicker one on the outside, just to outline everything. I'll add something to the sketch to show you what I mean. So thicker on the outside, thinner. So this would be my number 3. This is 2. And then for a 1, you know, if there was a split in the part or something like that, then this would be my number 1. So I have 3 line weights, and it's not an absolute rule. It doesn't have to be that way. It just helps me think through my drawing. Sometimes I have 5, 6, 10 line weights, but definitely when you're communicating, just like you would in Spanish or English or German, you want to keep your communication very clear and direct. And at the right moment or right time, right context, then you can add all the stuff. Okay, so that's my little side lesson on this schematic shape. Even just with the line weight, we can pull out some depth. All right, so now I've got this ring, and let's go ahead and show the handle here. And if you need to explain something, you know, throw an arrow and then some text, and I can say removable or just remove handle. All right, again, notice I'm holding my pen. I'm not holding it like I'm writing. In fact, if you want to have designer handwriting, you need to think of your letters as you're drawing letters, not writing letters. Okay, if you tell yourself you're writing, you're gonna get lazy about it and you'll have sloppy writing. But if you want good writing, right, just throw 2 lines down. That's what I like to do. Imagine how long the word is going to be and then draw the letters. So rather than, well, I'll show you the difference here in just a sec. Okay, so writing my letters. Here's a writing for me. And this is drawing my letters. So each part of each letter is a line or a curve, as opposed to me just writing freestyle. Now, if you have good enough handwriting, cool. You know, maybe you have a cool style, but I find it helpful to have these lines. And if you want to add another line, that's also helpful. And you can come up with different styles for your writing. I know this is a lot of information for you guys today, but I thought I would break it down and teach you a lot of stuff in the time we have today. So that's one way. For example, I can change the proportion of this, and now I have a different designer handwriting style. Okay, so you can change the proportion of your letters as much as you want. You could also slant all your letters. All right, so whatever works for you, but try and figure out something that you can own and be consistent at. All right, so let's keep working on our schematic here. Just a note on shading. I am using my fingers at this point, not really using my wrist per se. But when I'm shading with just a pen, you can add just a few lines here, for example. Hopefully you guys know about shadow cores and highlights. If you don't, stop me, ask me, post up in the chat. I think we had some questions in the chat. I'll try and pay attention to this. Let's see. What's an alternative for marker paper? Sometimes you can get really nice printer paper. So I'm not sure what the equivalent of weight is, but inkjet paper is nice to draw on as well. But if you don't use marker paper, the paper is like a sponge and will take your ink and suck it out of your pen. All right, so this is a fairly simple design, and as you can imagine, I would do multiple pages or elements like this. One thing I need to address is, you know, let's say charging or power. So, you know, what does that look like? Well, maybe from a schematic standpoint, I have my nice base here, and let's see. Let's say I want to add something to this. Maybe the battery pack is something like this. It's got a little connector, and those connect to each other. And now I have a way to power my thermos. Let's just draw the lid. You know, this round section, and we also had kind of our handle. Now I'm making a lot of assumptions. Of course, I haven't done any research on this for my own project, and I'm not doing a ton of iterations, but I might want to, you know, show what this looks like. So just planning ahead for my sketch page. Maybe there's some sort of base, and that could take a lot of different forms. In this case, maybe it's something like a dish. Okay, there's a nice little contour line like so, and I can draw an ellipse for the base. I'll just curve that bottom portion. And once again, just kind of cut those off. like so. And if this charges, you know, maybe there's some cable or something like that that comes off of it. Cool. And then the battery itself, I know this is kind of a mess, but the battery itself, maybe I want to sketch that and show, you know, here's some sort of connector. And if I want to show the bottom of the cup, I can draw an ellipse at an angle. Now, if you're not really sure about how to draw your ellipses, try and imagine a line going through the center of the circle in perspective you're trying to draw. Okay, so here, that axis is moving in this direction, and here it's moving vertically up and down. Okay, so maybe that's my battery pack charger, and we can just hint at the base or something. And I might want to group these ideas together on the page. We'll throw a little bit of marker on this page just to help it pop for you guys. All right, but maybe these are kind of related ideas, so I can have background elements connecting these, just these little squares to help tell the full story. Now, this is primarily a functional exploration, so I might want to do a little bit of form exploration before we jump into our final presentation sketch. Okay, so here, if you want to set up your page, you could do something like this where you just draw some central axes like that. And these are going to become the centers of each of the thermoses that we draw. All right, so let's just start by drawing some ellipses. Now you'll notice that the ellipse on the top is tighter than the ellipse on the bottom. And what I mean is this minor axis, the short axis is shorter than this one. And that's referred to as the degree of the ellipse. And if you've never heard that before, I'm going to show you an easy way to think about it, okay? So the degree of the ellipse, much like the top of this Coke can, you guys can see it right there. So right at eye level at the center of my camera lens, this looks like a straight line, okay? So if I rotate this way, you'll see this is a straight line. Now, it's a straight line because there's no angle between me looking at this and the top of the Coke can. As soon as I drop it, if I were to shoot a line straight out my head this way and another line here, the difference in those two lines is what's called the degree of the ellipse. So when I say a higher degree, it just means that the can is lower in relation to me looking at it, as opposed to right here. So that's an easy way to think of the degree. And it also works side to side. If an ellipse or circle is facing this way, it looks like a straight line. And when I move, and you can see it with my palm, as I move my palm, you can see more. And now it looks like a straight line. So it's kind of like that. If you're having trouble with ellipses and you want to think through it, that's a good way to do it. Okay, so smaller at the top, bigger at the bottom. All right, we can do the same thing here. Small, big, small, big. And sometimes I'll do this if I'm exploring, just give myself some parameters to work on. And now along this, right, I'm keeping in mind the same functional thing. It has a battery base that plugs in and out. It'll have a handle. It has a lid, okay? I'm not going into the insulation necessarily, but maybe some materials will help us insulate more. You know, metal is a really good conductor of heat, but wood actually retains heat more. So that's something we can think about as well, materials. So now let's say I want to change the shape, and I might be thinking of something like this if I were to draw a side view. You know, in this case, I could start with something like this. All right. This one, you know, maybe I have some sort of shape like so that I can start with. Okay, and my thought here is if someone is, you know, holding this, I'll just shade this in right here. So if someone's holding this, maybe it gives you a better ability to hold on to the thermos, okay, if you want to grip it, because you now have this kind of shape right there. So here's another one. Maybe the top of this one is more rounded. Okay, that's something we can play with, like so. All right, there's our lid. And maybe I change the shape of the handle as well. Maybe it's a big band, and maybe this one doesn't come off. So to pick the direction of the handle, I want to show you something here. Let me think of a good, I'll do it on the next page. So let's just do one more concept. All right, maybe something like that. And then we'll come back to these, throw some marker on, maybe add some backgrounds and text and so forth. So all that practice you do when you warm up, I'm still trying to do that. Draw with your shoulder, how you draw straight lines, focus on where you're going, not where you've been or where you are when your hand is moving. All right, so the thing I want to show you is if you're drawing something like a handle on a cylindrical object, you have to make sure the perspective is right, okay? So here in this case, let's just say we have a series of ellipses. Another thing worth pointing out is this is kind of a 2-point perspective, meaning I have a vanishing point to the left and the right, VPL, VPR, all right? If I want a more dynamic, exciting sketch, okay, and something that looks more realistic, then you want to make sure you have some taper, okay? And that's going to give you a 3-point perspective. All right, and this one will feel more natural and believable than something like this, but we can still use it to explain our concept here. Now, if I want to pick a direction for the handle, how do you draw that, right? Well, we can start by dividing our circle, or rather ellipse, and here I've divided it into eight portions. So let's say I want my handle to go this way, back. Well, now I can just draw some lines that work with this perspective, like so. And I have to kind of imagine, okay, what's the square on the top that's defining this ellipse? All right, so as I'm drawing, I'm thinking about all these things. I'm just not showing them on the paper, okay, because it gets really messy. But that's what I'm thinking about in my head right there. So now as I draw back, so there's our center line. And it's essentially like, you know, if you're looking at the top of the can and you're trying to decide, okay, what angle is this handle? I'm just, again, if you look at this plane, it gets messy. That's why I don't do it very often. But let's highlight it so you can see a little bit better. All right, so here's a blue plane right there. And let's do red. And there's our other plane, right? Okay, so I'm just basically taking the center point here and I'm moving out and saying, okay, let's extend back like so. And now I have a direction for the extension of my handle. Okay, so I could even, if I just wanted to draw down now, these two lines, and another line here, now I have a handle on this thermos, okay? So if you understand why, the how becomes a lot easier. I'm gonna say that a lot tonight. All right, so even just using this thicker pen or marker, like so, I can pull out that detail. And if I want this to wrap around, I can just draw a couple more ellipse sections like so, keep it rough. Just so you can kind of see why I did what I did. All right, but this is what's in my head as I'm drawing, okay? So hopefully that helps, you know, divide that ellipse and then pick a side. If I wanted the handle to go this way, I could do the same thing. There's the center of this ellipse, right? I could go out like so. and then go down like so, over, and then up. And now I have another handle. I'll just use this marker to kind of steal this shape, but now I have another handle on this side. All right, so look at the center, pick a direction, parallel lines, extend, or figure out what you need to get the geometry you want. In this case, if I wanted a cylindrical handle, okay, I could do the same thing. Pick a side, and now I'm going to draw an ellipse, circle, and then I can, so if the cross section of this is, say, round, another circle, because a sphere in perspective is a circle, right? No matter how you look at it, it's a circle. And maybe this has some sort of material on it. Okay, so that's how you can kind of explore and look at different things. All right, so let's go back to these sketches because I don't want to waste or throw them away. I do want to get those functional bits in. So maybe this is our battery section here. And I can throw in a quick handle like so. You may notice as well as I put these all on the page, they're different sizes, different positions. All right. I like to think that the layout or composition of a page is a lot like music. So if you listen to music where it has the same sound, it's kind of boring, right? And with a sketch, you want to have big beats, big sketches, and you want to have small sketches too. So it makes it more interesting of a presentation than if everything was the same size. Okay. So maybe for this sketch, instead of a traditional handle, maybe there's a loop on the top. That might be another idea because I've been kind of thinking of the same way to have a handle from carrying this. So I'll just create a little overlap here, just on the top, like so. And maybe on this one, there's some sort of button or indicator. Temperature. All right, we'll just shade that in real quick. It's just an idea, we're capturing it. And then I get to pick, okay, which one am I going to kind of work on and figure out more details for. Let's see, how about we do 2 loops. So this has 2 loops, and now it can come off like so. All right, maybe we have something like this for a handle. Rodrigo mentioned, figuring out proportion for things like handles and how do you figure that out and do it. One of the things I like to do if I'm sketching is I look at my own hand, and maybe it seems weird, but I try to look at my own hand or find an object in the room and then compare that object with my hand. Sounds like a cheat, but it's a really, really, really easy way to make the process a bit less complex as you're drawing. All right. Okay. Sorry, I had to answer something there real quick. Okay. So we have these concepts. We have, let's see, we have our thumbnails. So let's give these 2 pages some love, and then we'll pick maybe a direction. And then I like to do what's called, I don't know if you guys know the American toy, Mr. Potato Head or Frankenstein. So sometimes I like to take concepts and chop them up and then put the things I like in different ideas together. All right. So in this instance, I'm going to do what's called an abbreviated marker sketch. Okay, and the goal here is just to quickly communicate some form and give some body to elements on the page. Markers are stuck. Give some body to the elements on the page. So let's start with this sketch right here. Everything kind of looks the same. Nothing's really popping out. So at this point, what I'm going to do is look at things like, oh, this is the underside of that bottle. Here we have a dip. Okay, so just a little line like that. And now it has some shape to it. On the side, okay, anything facing up, I tend to keep white or light. All right, there's a little shadow core on this one. And we can do the same thing on some of these concepts. All right, so if you have trouble shading cylinders, I'm happy to go into detail on how to do that, but we're gonna keep moving. Just let me know, Rodrigo, if you want me to do that. But shadow core, highlights, that's kind of what I'm focusing on with just this one marker. Okay, if you're using marker, you can let the marker dry just a little bit and then kind of kiss the paper again with the marker, and it will be darker in those sections. All right, just like that. So now I have some gray on the page to further enhance the presentation. If there's something like an arrow that has action and it's important, then I can highlight that arrow or further enhance it, things like that. So now I have two areas of focus there. If I want, I can add a little bit more color. Say this is really important right here. It's like, oh yeah, this connection is very important. Then I just take one color or so and just shade in that background element. And so now you have a bit of variety on the page, which, you know, we've gone from just plain lines to, okay, there's something happening here, but you don't want to make it so overwhelming because all these things could be combined into telling that story of form, function, context, and detail. So we've got some form and function here. So now, as I'm shading these, I might decide, you know, the hand I don't want to be a main part of the sketch. So I'll just add some gray to it because it's just a supporting element, just like that. And now I can focus on whatever's on the page. Let's say, just for argument's sake, this is my favorite concept. Let's just say. Then I may want to add more color to this concept than I do the others. So where you place emphasis with color and line weight will communicate to the viewer what's most important on the page. So here, as I'm shading this, instead of shading in the whole strap and the direction with which I'm using the marker, so markers have a chisel tip, remember, and I can rotate that marker and place it in the right spot. So now immediately this is like, oh wow, I've got some pop there. Let's see, that's in red 8. Pardon me, I just need to grab something a little deeper here. Let's try the 17. We used the red 5, but okay, I'll show you a trick. Sometimes if you use the wrong marker and you can't get it any darker, you don't have to go buy a new one. Just take your pencil, rotate it to the side a little bit, and then I can just shade in over this color and get it a little bit darker. This works particularly well on marker paper because marker paper also has a very nice grain to it, meaning how rough the paper is. It has texture, but it's not too rough. Okay, actually having a pencil gives me a chance to show you another thing that's cool. If you have concepts like this, you can take a pencil on its side and just shade in that shadow core real quick and then add the color pop. So it's really fast, right? If you have that pencil. I do recommend, if you are learning to draw or trying to get better, to use a pen that never forgets and never forgives, because it's going to force you to think about what you're doing before you do it. All right, so let's get to this particular mug. Let's say we want to do a little bit more shading, give this some love. This looks like this is drying out. I could give you a lesson on how to refill Copics, but I won't. Hold on just a sec. My kids are calling me. Hold on just a sec. Okay. So here, I'm just using a cool gray 5. I'll add some shadow. All right, so, and now let's go ahead and just shade this one in. This is a cool gray 5, so I can go darker. Just kind of the idea here. All right, just like that. Now, if it's shiny, you're gonna have a more streaky appearance. If it's matte or textured, what I like to do is use the marker like this. And you can quickly create some textures. Let's say the top of this is wood though. We want to show that. And I'll do a couple more sketches. Actually, I'll just use this as the form that we'll use for our presentation page. And then I'll give you guys a chance to draw. We'll do some critique and then I'll draw some more as well, answer questions. All right, so this is just one marker. And as a tip, when I was telling Rodrigo before the stream started, they were asking, or no, I told them how many Copic markers I have. I have about 200, but it took a long time to get that many. And I used to, when I was in school, I'm not saying you should do this, but I used to donate blood and they would pay you money. So I would use that money to buy my markers. In case you're wondering how I have so many. Okay, so let's do the top here. And like I said, let's assume that maybe this is some sort of wood. And I'm not going to be too careful about my colors. Yeah, I don't think I need to be too careful. So let's go ahead and shade this in. Like so, just real quick. Wood is kind of streaky anyways, so I'm not too worried. All right, same thing, we'll get a shadow core in here. All right, and I'm trying to follow the shading I did on the base. Okay, so look at where this secondary shadow core and the primary ones are, and look at how I'm trying to align those shades and tones. Okay, that's what I'm trying to do when I give the marker a chance to dry and then hit it again. Now, like I said, that was a C5, so I'm going to take a cool gray 7 now and just hit this again. You do want to kind of be quick with your marker stroke if you can be. And I'm going between 5 and 7. Okay, so cool gray 5, cool gray 7. That's what I'm going between for these two. So on the bottom here, we'd have a shadow core. It's going to wrap a little bit, like so. And then meet up with this one. Depending on the lighting you're seeing, I like to try and keep it fairly simple. But there's an example of just shading in your shadow core. So there's the C7. Now that that's dry, I'm going to hit it again. Just a tip, this looks really weird, but I'm going to do it anyways for you. If you're looking at your drawing and you want to make sure you have enough contrast, just take your eyes, squint your eyes, and look at your paper. What that's going to do is it's going to get rid of the detail on the drawing and have you focus on the value. Okay, so it's going to have you focus on contrast and not the details. Sometimes it's easy to get lost in the details. So as I'm drawing, I like to squint, look at it, and then that tells me, okay, I need to get darker here and up here, all right? Just in these shadow cores. All right, so just like that. Now that feels better to me. Shadow here. So as I'm doing this, I'm kind of squinting just a little bit. Okay, so I can take out some of that extra stuff as I'm looking at this. All right, so don't be afraid of contrast. Contrast is your friend. Okay, think of it like that. Contrast is your best friend. Because when you're drawing on paper, you're drawing in 2 dimensions, right? You're not necessarily drawing in 3 dimensions. And so contrast is what's going to give you the illusion of 3 dimensions as you're drawing. All right, so there's that portion. Now I'm going to jump back to the top here, and I was using an E13. So let's jump to maybe this 37. And for the wood top, I'm just going to kind of sketch in a little bit of wood grain. Now, if you've never sketched wood before, you're not going to know how to do it. So what I would challenge you to do, I do have a lot of videos on my YouTube. I do have videos on materials and how to sketch them. But more importantly, keep your eyes open, look around you, and see if you can create a symbol for that thing you're trying to show. All right. So I'll take this 35 and let's go ahead and boost the shadow core here. All right. There'll be a little shadow under this strap as well. I'm assuming my light source, you want to think about where your light is coming from as you're doing this. I'm assuming mine's from the top and the right. Okay, and I'll just go ahead and push those values. Let's jump back to my 37 here. Again, squint your eyes, look at your drawing. Slightly close your eyes, and that's going to help you with your contrast. So once I have most of my marker on, then I like to do a bit of enhancement of my lines. So I'm just going to take this black Copic marker using the brush side and get my outline. So remember I talked about 3 line weights. So this is the heaviest line weight just on the outside. It helps clean up your sketch lines for one, but also will help your sketch just pop a bit more. And if you noticed, I rotate the page all the way around because I want to make sure I'm drawing in the way that I want to draw. I forgot to shade this in, so I'm just going to shade in this little indicator window here. And let's leave a spot for a highlight. Okay, so I'll shade in the rest here. Maybe just have 2 lines like that. All right, so something like that. And now it's starting to pop out of the page. So we have an interesting thing happening on the page here, this form exploration. Again, we did all this work of thinking about form, function, context, details. Haven't even gotten to context yet, but we'll get to that on the next page. But we have 3 levels of interest or emphasis on this page. So we have this that stands out the most because it has color, line weight, texture, and scale. So color, line weight, texture, and scale. How you use these elements in your sketch are going to communicate importance and emphasis. Color, line weight, scale, texture. So remember that. Let me just fix this line I forgot to grab just here on the lid. If there's a little bit of a shadow, and I'll just come in on the corners just a little bit, throw in a secondary line like so. And on the base, I'm going to do the same thing right here. So for texture on something like this, if it's matte, one of the things I like to do is just add a few dots with my pen to it. You don't have to do this. This is just something I picked up. If you pick up a better way to do it, that's fine as well. And let's get on this window. Just a couple marks, maybe for, this is a white paint pen, but maybe this is, the window to show you how much coffee is in there, that kind of thing. And these pens are nice because if you did mess up with your marker, you can just add a little bit. Sometimes it's good for adding little dots to your sketch as well for texture. Okay, so there's 1, 2. Oh, sorry, I didn't say what 2 was. So this is 1 because it has the line weight, scale, texture, color. And this one is 2 because it has value or shade, contrast. And it appears that I've given it a little bit more attention, right, in terms of line weight and so forth. And if you were to leave this one gray, for example, it reads as, okay, these are supplementary, primary, and secondary sketches, or 1, 2, 3 on the page. Again, just like music, if I were making music, right, I'll try and make some music for you guys. It's pretty boring. Same thing, but as soon as you go, right, it's more interesting. You might not like it, but it's more interesting. So think of ways to use color, scale, texture, the position of the element on the page to help you come up with a more interesting drawing. Let's see, Daniel is asking, Daniel Rodriguez, when you draw multiple sketches on the same page, do you give each one of them their own light source, or do you use the same? Could you give each one? You could give each one their own light source, but I would say don't overthink it too much. For me, my go-to is just top right. That's what's in my head. That just makes it super easy. So similar to the other sketch with the pencil, you know, if I don't feel like I'm getting enough contrast, I can just add some pencil to this one. And now I have a nice gradient on the body. It actually adds a nice little bit of texture as well. So let's say this is our chosen concept. We're going to go something with a wood lid and, you know, this base and this different handle. If you wanted to do a more traditional handle, that's cool. This one, you know, might have its advantages, might not. We'll see. I'm just going to go with it. So now on the next page, I'm going to think about maybe, so this one kind of captures the form. So I don't need to keep doing that. Okay, I might need to put a pin, so to speak, on the next page and say, hey, here's the concept we're dealing with. So by pin, I mean, let's just do a quick thumbnail of this concept, like so, just right here. All right, there's our strap. You could even, for the wood texture, do that with your pen. You don't have to do all the marker stuff on this one. And just to finish it up, we will use that same marker, do the shadow core technique, right? So now it has a little bit of color, just a little bit. I'll zoom in so you can see right there, just barely any marker. Keep it light and fresh. All right. Okay, there we go. And on the body, we'll just use this 30% gray, like so. And I'm gonna use my 70% gray because this will be easier just to get a little window in place, like so. So there's my, and this white marker, but there's my concept just real quick on the page. And if we want to bump up contrast or clarity, we can do that, right? Something like that. Okay, so now I might want to show a bit more of the context. Like I said, I mentioned things like maybe the base comes off, maybe this thing needs to charge in the corner of a room, that kind of thing. So we have our main form, we have a reminder sketch here, what we're doing. Actually, let's do a little power indicator or something right there. Maybe this lights up. I can get back to that. Okay, so now I want to show, okay, what does this look like without the battery in place? You know, if I had a dotted line, is it something like this? Is it just straight? So let's go ahead and sketch that, and then I'll show, yeah, so one showing the battery being removed. All right, so something like this. On our page. And to show that, I'm just going to use an arrow as a background. Okay, real simple. And let's go ahead and draw our other ellipse here and kind of our base, like so. Let's find the center, and maybe there's some kind of connector with that. This doesn't quite show, you know, surface-wise or form-wise what's happening here, but that's okay for now as we're telling our story. And if we did want to show that, like I said, you could also draw ellipses kind of like this. So you could draw a bit of, okay, what's the shape of this look like? You know, maybe it's like that. There's our connector. I'm just roughing it in for this supplementary sketch. All right. And now, just to finish this off, let's say we have this thing on a charger of some sort. Now, as far as the charger goes, there's a couple different ways to do it. We can do some small vignettes. Maybe it's inductive charging, maybe it plugs in. So if it's inductive, right? Maybe it sits in some sort of base, and these could be cross sections, or maybe it's flat, whatever it sits on. Just kind of doodling here. Let's see, what else could you do? You could have it, I don't know if you've seen those tea kettles, electric tea kettles, but it could be that the base has some sort of cross section like that. So I just get to decide, okay, which one of these do I want to try? I'm going to go with maybe something like, let's go with something like number 1 here. So I'll start with an axis. Let's do our lid. Sides. I'm going to flip the paper here. Our base. And I am going to cheat a little bit because I'm running out of space. So I made that just a little bit shorter. And now a nice big ellipse for this base. Little cross-section line, like so. And we'll finish this one off with some marker. So I'll add just a small background element here and hint at this strap. So just real quick. All right. So it looks kind of messy. You're like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? You just have to decide, you know, which of these sketches is more important and is going to get more attention. But what always helps me anyways, if I have a sketch like this and I'm trying to clean it up a bit, is just using line weights, okay? So if I use those line weights effectively, then it brings some order to this chaos. All right, so a little bit of an offset line there. That shape I'm gonna use as highlight for this body. So now, let's say the base, the inductive charging base is wood. You know, I think that would be kind of cool. So again, think of your light source. But also remember, light never hits a surface perfectly evenly. That's a rabbit hole I can go down and explain to you guys. But whenever I'm shading something, I try to vary the light on that surface. So if my light's coming from the top right, which again, I tend to assume, you're also going to have reflected light in the scene, meaning there's a light in front of me right now in this room, but I also have some colored lights behind me. That's all playing with how we see things in reality here. So this little white spot that I've left, it's almost like, okay, maybe the light hit the wall and the wall is reflecting light back onto the top of this thing. So that's kind of how I'm thinking.
We have a couple of questions also.
Okay.
On
chat.
Yeah, tips on light and contrast, and another one. What do you do when your drawing becomes too dark because of shadow?
All right, I'll answer the second question first. When it becomes too dark because of shadow, you start over. The thing with markers is markers are translucent. Do you know what that means? They're not like paint. Okay, so if you go too dark with the marker, you can't really go light. With paint, you can just put more paint on and it replaces what was there. But with marker, when you go too dark, there are some things you can try. One thing I try is a colored pencil. I can show you a quick example. So I'll show you on this piece of paper. So let's say let's use a 70%. So let's say I shade, like, okay, I'm shading, and then you keep shading, and then you keep shading, and you're like, oops, I went too dark there. I'll let that dry and then I'll show you. I guess I can use the same square. So you can use something like a white pencil and then try and shade over this spot, like so. So if you have a set of colored pencils, you can do that. All right, and that will lighten things up quite a bit. But the downside to doing that is, let's say I want to go darker again. It doesn't quite work with marker on top of it. So that's why if you're going to put anything opaque like pencil or paint on your paper, you want to do that the very last step, right? So there's really no going back. The other thing you can do, depending on what you're doing, is you could just use some white paint marker like this. Just get it lighter. But again, the thing you can't do is put the marker on top of this. So that's why I say just start over. And then the other question was problems with lights and contrast. So give me tips. All right, I'm going to give you a quick lesson on contrast. So I want you to take a look around the room you're in. I see some of your screens. Look at where two walls meet in your rooms. Okay, you'll notice that one of the walls likely looks lighter than the other wall. In fact, what's probably happening, if I were to draw this out, right? Let's say this is your room. I see a couple of you sitting at desks, right? You're just sitting here looking at your laptops, drawing. This is my sketch of you guys sitting and drawing, okay? And you've got some sort of light in the room, and this light's shining, right? Like so. This is a very tall ceiling apparently, but what's going to happen is this light's going to hit this wall, it's going to bounce back, and it's going to bounce back over here, and this is going to hit there and there, and then your laptop light is hitting this wall. So my point in saying this is light doesn't hit surfaces evenly. So when I'm shading with my marker, okay, I might do something like this toward this corner. Now it's not an exact science, but what I'm trying to do is create a gradient to show, okay, we're going from dark to light, and then in this corner, I want a change in contrast. I want a discernible difference in contrast, okay? Let that dry, hit it again. It's very subtle, but what happens when you put those two together is now they feel like, oh, this has some direction, this has some direction, that wall. But if I had two surfaces like this, even if I have the line in the middle, okay, like that, and I were to shade both of these in the corner similarly, like so, you don't quite know what's happening. You don't quite get that difference in contrast and directional change like you do when you position your contrasting elements close together. So what I like to say as well is lightest lights. And I didn't come up with this, my professor in college did, against darkest darks. All right, so position your light areas next to your dark areas, and that's how you're going to get contrast. So even something cylindrical or curved like this, when I do my shadow core, let's use this 50% so you can see something like this shadow core. Okay, as I get dark here, and as I have highlight on this far side, like so, I'm positioning my lights against these darks. And that's just going to give me that feeling of three-dimensionality in this shape, as opposed to me just creating an even looking shade on this. I hope that answers your question. If you have a specific problem, I'd be happy to answer that question for you as well. All right. So lightest lights, darkest darks. Think of it that way. And if you ever forget that, just keep an eye open. I like to say if you're going to learn to draw or teach yourself to draw, you need to have your eyes open and draw from observation so you can draw from your imagination. Okay? So let's get the top here since I already have this brown marker out. Get this top in. Just throw a shadow core like so. So here, for example, on the top of this shape, I've positioned a light light against a dark dark, and that's going to give me the contrast I'm after. There's also a gradient on the top from back to front. It's lighter in the back on the top. All right, so it's slightly lighter in the back, darker in the front. Very, very subtle, but makes a difference. And then I'll throw in a secondary shadow core. So primary, secondary, lights coming this way. Sometimes I mix it up and to answer that question earlier, but it's just easier for me to just think of my singular light source and just make it work. All right, so now I'm gonna make some of this a little bit darker with this brown marker. And I do want these to be wood, these two surfaces. Now, if my light's coming this way, I'm gonna have some shadowing happening. So I can just capture that here. Depending on the strength of the light source, we're gonna get shadow core on this base, highlight, all that good stuff. So we'll shade that in as well. And now let's get our wood grain. And you can decide if you want to use pencil, if you want to use pen. If you have brown pencils, you could do that as well. I'll just use this marker. We'll just keep going. All right, just like that. Boost my shadow core. I actually made a mistake because the light's coming from this side. So I will use that trick I showed you, put some white there and try and bring that out just a little bit. So I'm glad you asked that question because now I get to show you how to do it in one of my sketches. All right, so now here, I'll do the same thing, just kind of sketch in some wood grain, maybe a couple flecks here and there, spots. Like that. And we'll get the body in. I think I'll just do gray on this sketch, just so it's a supporting element. So I'll jump back to, let's do cool gray 5. I guess I could show you a darker value set here. So let me grab my other markers. If you want to use technology in your product, how do you know if it's possible? You just research. I'm basing this on things that I know exist, just to keep it simple for you guys. So I know there are coffee and tea thermoses that have power sources, so it's not imaginary. And creativity a lot of times is about connecting things, right? So your phone can charge inductively. So what if your coffee mug did, right? A lot of that sometimes is dependent on materials. All right, so I'm using a cool or neutral gray 7 here. So I'm just trying to be a little bit careful because it is dark. All right, because I wanted a darker body than I had before. All right, so let me get the shadow core in, and I'm leaving just this little sliver on the far side. Something like that. And I'll use this neutral gray 3 now to just kind of soften up this highlight section. Looks like this one's drying out too. I'm going to mix marker brands and fingers crossed this works just fine. I was using a different brand of marker, but the idea being I want to create a subtle gradient so that this doesn't feel as intense. Okay. So at this point, I think I have enough to use some pencil to kind of help this out. Remember, this base is textured. I'm just using a neutral gray 7. Textured surfaces, even if they're the same color, will appear slightly darker. So I will be going a little bit darker in value right through here. Sorry, I was just looking at a question here. It says, I assume you've thought of all this development throughout the day. That's an important part of your method to prepare your hand with your brain before you start the sketch. I didn't think of all the details. I just knew I wanted, something with multiple parts because I thought it'd be good to show you a little bit of exploded view sketch. I knew I wanted to do something powered, right? So it keeps your beverage or coffee warm. I didn't really get to context in this one, but maybe we can do a little sketch and show you. And I didn't know what kind of handle. Rodrigo just mentioned, we want a handle. So I thought, okay, I'll just figure that out when I'm drawing. But yes, a lot of my creative process happens when I am exercising or just relaxing. It's not always when you're sitting at a desk that the creative process really works, okay? So at this point, I have enough marker on the paper that now I can bring out the pens to kind of help the concept. So on the outside, if you have one of these paper-made flares, I don't know if they're available where you guys are or what pens you use. I like them a lot because I can hit a line multiple times and get a thicker line from it. Just multiple times like that. Get a darker line in. And here I just have a pencil, so I'll use this pencil just on the perimeter of the base. A little bit of white. If you don't know why I'm doing that, I can show you as well real quick. Just a little side view explanation. I think I might. Because all these things, like, they're rooted in just basic understanding of lighting and how parts come together. So I'll show you that real quick. All right, so I'm gonna explain why we put a white line when we have two things coming together, and it makes a huge difference in your sketches. So let's say I'm looking at the lid of my coffee here, coffee mug, something like this. In reality, if I were to zoom in, at this point, there's actually two lines here, right? There's gonna be a little bit of a gap, usually, in a product. But if I were to zoom in and blow that up, really what's happening, here's the lid, there's a gap, and you're gonna have a slight round as well, just a very, very slight round. Okay, you might even have a round here as well. So this is our lid. Here's our strap. Wood, whatever. So let's say I'm looking at this, and again, we have a nice light bulb right here, and it's shining light down, okay? Light's gonna pass this edge, like so, right at that point. Zoom in so you can see. So light's gonna pass that edge, and where it passes that edge, you're gonna have shadow, right? Light's also going to hit this edge and be reflected back to you at certain points, right? Because it's round, that was backwards. Because it's round, you're gonna get a certain intensity at a very finite point as it reflects back to you, the viewer, if you're looking at this edge, right? So where it's reflecting back to you, that's where you get a highlight. That's how highlights work. Isn't that cool? So again, if you can understand that, you know exactly where to put things and make your sketches look awesome because you know how light works, you know how shadow works, and the way to learn all of that is just by keeping your eyes open. Draw from observation so you can draw from imagination, right? So that's why I put those tiny white lines. And if you want to make it pop even more, just a little white dot here and there. Okay, it's just going to help it pop. Just like that. All right, something like that. I did have some marks on the glass itself, but I think I want to have those on the side of the vessel. So I'm just going to use some white here. Mark these like so. A little bit of white pencil on that black area. All right. So now let's pop in a bit more. Okay, so let's get a background in, touch up this sketch, which, like I was saying earlier, just focusing on line weight. Same pen I sketched with. If you can hit the line more than once, great. If you're struggling with that, then you can just use a thicker marker. All right, but just by making those lines a little heavier, it immediately is going to give you additional clarity in this sketch. And because I don't want it to overwhelm the other ones, just like we did before, oops. Sorry about that. Just like we did before, a little bit of a shadow core. And then on this exposed surface on the base, I'm not really focused on materials. I just want to show some shadow right there, that it's two different parts. All right, same thing, or similar thing rather, just like that. Okay, so for this shadow, or sorry, for this background rather, let's use this blue again. Shade the outside. Whenever I'm applying marker to a defined area, I kind of like to run the marker on the outside. That's just, it makes me feel comfortable with applying the rest of the marker. So 1, 2, and just keep going. Fill that in, like so. If you want to create a gradient, wait till it dries and then just hit a couple, maybe skip a line. Wait till it dries again. Blow on it, make a wish, whatever you want to do. And then go one more time like so. And now you have a background with a little bit of a gradient on it. And there's a couple things you can do here. You know, we can add a little bit of line weight to the gradient, to the background rather. Sometimes I add style dots is one thing I like to do. If I want to call out or emphasize an area, you can, it's risky unless you're feeling really confident in your skills and abilities. But let's say I did want to call out the inductive charging. I could draw a circle here and then just say what it is. So inductive charging pad. Okay. You can also number your notes if you want to. Also helpful. Oh yeah, I did say this was an arrow, so I should finish that up. At least make it look like part of an arrow. A little bit of line weight there. How do I decide the color of my background? Sometimes I try to go for complementary colors, meaning if it's orange, do blue. If it's red, green. If it's red, sometimes I'll do blue. So complementary or analogous colors is kind of what I like to use when I'm putting in that background. But I don't want the color to be too similar. Otherwise, the sketch kind of gets lost, right? So if I put an orange here, it wouldn't feel as good because orange and brown, these are two very close colors, if you will, same color family. So I didn't want to do that. So maybe on this one too, one thing you could do is if you did have an alternate concept for a handle, you could kind of show that. Let's see, trying to decide which way. Let's go this way. So I could show that in the sketch. You know, maybe there is some alternate concept here, extra idea. You could sketch that in. And just call it out, say, you know, alternate handle. All right, I think Rodrigo, now is probably a good time. We can review what everyone's been up to. If someone wants to submit something, I believe you said you had an idea how to do that. So
yeah, the idea is that if one of our students want to share one of their drawings, I think it would be great. So you can give them some feedback. I know it's you have to be brave, guys, just to show your work, because actually it's amazing your skills. It's amazing, Spencer. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I was watching you though. You're pretty good yourself.
Well, I'm just trying to replicate what you are doing right now, but for sure, it's really important to have a clear idea, no, first to start
Yeah.
to draw. But yeah, it's amazing. And
All right, so I'm just looking at the chat windows here. I don't know if that's the best way to
maybe
see everything.
let's see if one of our students wants to share. I will pick someone, but I don't know how do they feel. But I'm really I would like to see the work of Sandra Solis, Santiago, because I know them, right? Itream, and these students are very good. They have a good skills. Of course, it's a never-ending process, but the guys, or well, girls, just send us an image on the chat, and we can just talk about it. So let's see. We have also, I don't know, from other campus, because there are students from 4 different campus around Mexico. So
okay.
I don't know. I know all the students. Also, Fernanda Ocio she's one of our students, also from Querétaro. Alejandra also.
One of my best friends in the United States is from Querétaro.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But he lives in Querétaro.
No, that's where he's from. Yeah, he's a shoe designer now. So Querétaro.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Querétaro. But okay, actually, we have your your plane ticket for coming, but of course, we you cannot come today with this situation.
Yeah,
But
but
we
it's
will
okay.
figure out to have a more time and more interaction with you, Spencer. Of course, would be great to having you here.
Several years ago, I went to Sedim. I did a week class
Sedim.
at Sedim.
Great.
That was
Yeah,
fun.
in Mexico City.
No, Sedim was I was in Monterrey.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Sedim is in Monterrey. This is another design school. Yeah, but with a similar name, but it's different. Yeah, yeah,
Oh.
I know very well the Sedim school. And
Yeah.
Monterrey is a nice city, but no, nothing to compare with the Bajío. You know,
Oh, okay.
León, San Luis Potosí, Querétaro. It's the best place in Mexico. Of course, Guadalajara, it's also an amazing city, and it's a little bit not so big as Monterrey or Mexico City,
Oh,
and with a great cuisine, a nice view. So, okay, guys, if anyone wants to ask something, I know Fer is there. So maybe you don't want to show, and it's okay. I mean, the idea of this experience to have a good time. So don't worry about. It's just do some questions about your work. Actually, I have a question for shading the cylinders, because I always
oh,
struggling with
okay.
the direction, no? Because in one sense, I start doing in one sense, and then I realize that the plane goes in another direction, so
Mhm.
I change. So, and sometimes it looks good, but sometimes don't.
All right. So here's your explanation of how to shade a cylinder. All right. So let's say this cylinder is on the ground, like so, and I'm positioned here, and I'm looking at this cylinder. This is the front, and of course, this is the top. Okay. So I'm still here. I'm positioned in the front because we're in 3 dimensions now. So I'm positioned in the front, but also directly in front of the cylinder. So the position of the lighting matters as much as the position of where you are. But let's say I have a light above, like so, but the light is also off to the side here, okay? So this light source, and we're just gonna assume that all the light rays are parallel. It makes it easier for you to understand at this point. So I've got light rays coming from this light source like this, right? Now, before I get into this, I want to talk about one important principle. Have you guys taken physics?
Uh, well, yeah, we used to.
Many years
Physics.
Now,
ago.
Okay. Physics, geometry. So when you have a surface like this line or these series of lines represent the surface. So you could say this is the ground plane. All right. When light hits this ground plane, something magical happens. You can divide like so, and this angle of incidence, or I, is going to be equal to the angle at which that light ray reflects back. So that's how a mirror works, okay? So if you're ever trying to figure out reflections in your sketches, the angle of incidence is equal to the angle of reflection. And if this is a polished surface, for example, I'm digressing a little bit, but if this is a polished surface, right? And let's say there's a person standing here, right? They're casting some light ray here. It's going to reflect that way. You can just project back and then straight down. This is how you calculate the reflection of a person, right? Same height, up and down, like magic. All right, let's focus on this though. So the angle of incidence equal to the angle of reflection on a flat surface. So what that means, I'm skipping ahead because we don't have a ton of time, but here in this instance, when the light hits this cylinder, okay, like so, if you draw a line tangent at that point to the circle, you now have a way to calculate, okay, tangent meaning 90 degrees to this ray of light. Okay, now I can figure out this relationship. So imagine if this circle had lots of, or this cylinder rather, had lots of tangent points, right? And all our light rays are coming in, like so. Now on the outside, this light ray is going to pass the cylinder and you're going to get shadow. On this side, it's going to pass the cylinder and you're going to get shadow. All right. Here, where these, and I know this is getting very messy. Let's zoom in so you can see a bit better. All right. So we have line, line, line like so and so. All right. So as this is turning, right, and my eye is here, at a certain point, I'm going to have a high concentration of light rays reflecting back to me. And at a certain point, they're going to start moving away, you know, as, and this is not the correct angle. It's actually more like this because anyhow, but my point is here we have intense light here, right, on this surface, okay, the light's going to reflect away and away and away and so forth. So that's how a curved surface kind of works. And what happens is right in this area, I'm going to get a highlight, okay, and right in, let's see, right around here, you're going to get a shadow core, right, where the light is just falling off the side of the cylinder. Now, this is assuming there's one light source in the environment. But even if you had one bulb in a room, that light is going to reflect off everything and bounce everywhere. So there's actually going to be reflected light coming back on the far side of the cylinder and even illuminating these sides. So what does that mean? Let's change our orientation a bit. So it means that when I have a cylinder, if I'm shading it dead on, straight on, like this, and again, thinking of my curved section of a cylinder here, right? I'm going to have some sort of highlight. I'm going to have shadow core, and then I'm going to have a gradient, but I'm also going to have reflected light, okay? So as you fall away from the highlight, it's going to get darker, but then you're also going to have reflected light. So if I translate that, and I'm just rotating my paper to make this easier, if I translate that to the cylinder, and just for fun, let's use some color. So I'll use a 27, 24, 22, and 20. Well, 21. I'll use a 20. So you want to work light until you get it right. Okay, so I'm just working with this very light pink here. So I have this shadow core. So I'm going to shade that in like so. And this is good practice, by the way, if you are trying to just learn how to create gradients. So notice right in this area, I've skipped a white spot because I want to keep that light. Depending on how shiny the cylinder is, you're going to pick up more reflections or less. All right, but like I said, next to the light, we want to have that dark because that's where the light's falling off. And then on the very far side of the cylinder, we have reflected light. So shadow core as well. And then we have that reflected light. Okay, but I'll just keep building this gradient. I'm gonna make a nice red or reddish cylinder here. But even this is enough to kind of start and kick things off. Now I'm jumping to my red 22. Again, squint your eyes if you're not really sure of your contrast or if you have enough. You can always squint your eyes and take a look. All right, I'm basically just I'm just gonna put these to the side, but I'm trying to create a gradient, right? I like to start with the shadow core, get that nice and dark. Now I'm going to jump back to this 22 and now start to blend next to the 24, like so. Because you don't want too stark or too drastic of a transition, right? So even jumping back now to the 20, so I can kind of create this gradient. So now I'm going to jump to my 27, and then we'll finish with, I don't have a 29, I think. Yeah, 27 is the deepest, but I have some other reds I can use. So here now, this is a red 27 Copic marker. Get this shadow core in. I'll just go ahead and shade in the bottom. I'm going to put a black line there anyways. All right, so building that contrast, those values. And sometimes, like I said, you have to jump between markers. So that was 27. So now 24. Jump back to my 22. And squinting at this, I do want to go a bit deeper or darker on this side. So now I'm just going to try and grab one I think will work, like this red 46 that I have. Let's build this value up. And again, this is why marker paper is great, because I've just been coloring, and there's no ink on the paper behind it, okay? And I can keep doing that. Let's take this 20, I'll do 24. And I just want to, I'm just rotating the marker a little bit just to create a little bit more contrast, right, and gradient. So that's kind of how I shade a cylinder. This one probably could use a little bit more love. What I mentioned on the black base here. So I'm just gonna hit that like so. And now I can clean this up, just a little outline. I'm gonna try and make it a little darker. Maybe I'll mess it up, but I do want the shadow core to be just a little darker. Yeah, that feels better. So something like that is how I would shade a cylinder if you're looking at it dead on. Now, if it's at an angle, similar approach. I'll just do a small example here. I'll just start with 22. Or meaning if, you know, if you're doing a cylinder like so, then I can do the same thing. Shadow core, midtones, highlight area, secondary shadow core. So that's 20. I'm just going to jump to 24. Kind of like that. Back to my 22 on the far side here. Squint, take a look. Now, how do you deal with the top surface, right? You've got a very light area here. You've got a dark area here. So I like to go dark in the front, which is a bit counterintuitive, meaning you might not think that's the case, but having that contrast is going to help this feel three-dimensional. And if you have enough contrast, you don't really even need lines. Okay, so there's a little bit of darkness in the front there, and I'll just keep creating my gradient. Now I can jump to this 27, build up on the sides. We'll go ahead and use this 46 as well. I will mute this just like so. Okay. And now jumping to this red 59 to kind of fill that in. All right, so just like that. That is how, that's how I shade a cylinder. So does that answer your question for you?
Yes, of course. But the problem is that I just have two reds, so I need to
Oh.
Or I need
yeah, so
more budget for my.
Yeah, so you said something interesting. I would recommend, if no matter what color you have, try and have 3. And so what I mean is, so here I have you know, a bunch of different reds, but if I'm getting markers, what I want to do, let's use grays as an example. Do I have enough here? I think I have enough. 1, So bear with me. 5, 6, 7, 1. So I need 2 and 3. Okay, let me grab. This is going to be a pain to clean up, but I do want to show you this because it's important. Okay, 3. I don't know where my neutral grade 2 is though. All right. So these are all neutral grays. I have here anyways 1 through 10 values. Okay. So I'll show you how to save money on markers. So here's 1. 2. 3. That one's a little dry. 4. 5. 6. 7. This is 9. Did I miss 8 somehow? I think I did. I can't find my neutral 8. So I will cheat. I will cheat for you. Okay, 9, 10. Yeah, I have no idea where it is, but I'll use the, I think I had a cool gray 8. Yeah, I'll use a cool gray just to show you. But it's gonna look a little bit weird. So 8, and then 9, and then 10. All right, so what you wanna do, so there's all my values, okay? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, so at the very least, you know, this is 1. What you want to do is go like this. So you could have, you know, a 1, a 3, 5, 7, and 9, and you have enough values. So you can skip 2 or skip one value here. So I don't need the 2, I don't need the 4, 6, 8, or 10. Or if you have a 2, you can go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. If you just have 3, you just want to go 2, 4, 6, or 3, 5, 7. All right. So when I started with my grays, I would always just make sure I had 3, 5, 7. Part of the reason for that is you'll see here with the 3, even though it's a little dry, I can go over the same spot, and now the 3 looks like a 4.
Mhm.
Okay, so if I just go a little bit more, the 3 looks like a 4, 5 will look like 7, or 5 will look like 6, sorry, and so on. So with the red, it's kind of the same thing. With Copics, if you know the number on the top, so I'll show you here. So I have a 22 and a 24, right there, 22, 24. The first number being the same means it's the same color family. I don't even have to think about it. It's like 2, and then the second number is the value. So the 22 is lighter than the 24, and it's 2 values away. So the next would be 26, but there is no 26, so there's 27. So I know these 3 reds will work perfectly together. All right. Where it gets a little risky or tricky is in my case here, I used a 59 and a 46, but I've used them before. And I have a 37 and a few other reds. So that's one way to save money is skip the values, but make sure you have two values apart in your markers. So there was a question how to render the mug handle. I'll just show you real quick.
Great. Thank you for the tip.
So let's say I
have more
have,
than.
what's that?
Yeah, I have more than two.
Oh,
So
okay.
now I realize that I have the R02, the R08, and then I jump to the R. Oh wait. But yeah, now I understand a little bit more about this. Okay, but thank you, Spencer. I think the time is run out.
Okay.
So I don't know if one of my colleagues have a question, or Xochitl, if you want to add something to this experience. At least for me, it has been a great experience, and of course, I'm eager to do it again, maybe in a different scenario. No.
Yeah.
But
that'll be fun.
Leo, Ruben, Alan, if anyone, or all the students also, if anyone wants to share with us something, please. It's the time.
Yes, I have one question for Spencer, if I may.
Okay.
What was the first subject you was passionate to draw? I mean, that you can stop draw something.
What was the first what that told me I couldn't stop?
The first object.
Oh, cars and robots. I love cars and robots. That's what I like to draw, what I love to draw. But when I was learning in school, I would draw cylinders, just lots of cylinders, lots of cubes, learning just basic geometry. So I did a lot of that.
What kind of robots? Decepticons robots?
All kinds. I mean, I'm looking at my sketchbooks over here, but I don't have time to show you all my college sketchbooks. I have about, let's see, 12. 12
Don't worry, maybe next time.
Yeah, maybe next time I'll show you and talk a little bit more about, sketchbooks and what to draw, how to draw, that kind of thing.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Just one last message for our students. Please don't be shy and send us your drawings. We would love to publish in our Instagram page, and of course, Spencer, we would love also to have yours. So
Okay.
if you could just send me your sketches, we'll publish on our profile. And now I can see Xochitl. So yes, Xochitl.
I know that the sketch nights that you have organized, they have this special atmosphere and spirit of having good time sketching and sharing the pleasure of sketch. But I really love if you could all show in your cameras what you have done, whatever it is. And I could ask Spencer if he wants to say a couple of things of what he could see in those drawings. And if I know that even Alan had his question unanswered, so it would be delightful to follow with this dynamic of the night. But probably you need to do some other things. But could you please all show your drawings, and Spencer makes a couple of
just on in front of the camera. The idea is also to share the results. Actually, mine is here. Great, thank you, Ruben. Jose Ignacio, you're doing it. I also have the Paola, good. Ferocio, great. I have also, I can see the.
Stay there, please, to have the picture.
Let's.
One JP, it's nice.
Yeah.
Snapchat.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. At least they were drawing. I mean, they were not chatting or doing different activity. Ale, come on, don't be shy.
I can't
Great.
tell from Paola's, but that's some nice marker work
Good.
on the top middle sketch. That's really nice.
GP, good work also.
What's that? Sorry.
Not GP. There's a student with
Oh,
GP.
okay.
I think he has a good.
Gabriel,
Nice.
good one.
I would say the best lines are probably, at least the lines I like. Doesn't necessarily mean they're the best, but JP Rallo.
Yeah.
So a couple of things to watch out for. I'll give you a couple more tips here, because I'm seeing a few common things. When you draw your ellipses, don't draw them like this. Okay, try and draw a full ellipse. All right, because you want to be able to draw tangency like that, not like that. Because if I were drawing this shape from the top view, what I'm really drawing is something like this, right? It's because it has points. So that's not tangent. All right, so we don't want to do that. This from the top view, if I were looking at this one here, that's a circle. All right, so remember, circle in perspective is an ellipse. So even when you do this example, you're not seeing, and this one, we calculated out, you're not seeing this kind of shape. So just watch out. I saw that on a few of yours. I would say you could probably, like, it's going to be uncomfortable, but try and draw faster. See how fast you can draw, and try and speed up every day just a little bit. When you draw slow, it gives your hand more of a chance to make mistakes than if you draw fast. Because even when I draw slow, I don't draw that well. At least some of the energy is lost from that drawing. It's not as compelling. There's some wiggly lines here, as opposed to, okay, if I can just draw this a lot faster, even if it's not perfectly accurate, this has better energy than this one over here. At least that's how I feel about it. And if you mess up, do it again.
And again.
Yeah.
And again.
So better energy. Where like this is like falling asleep. Oh, this one's like, yeah, let's go. And you want people to be excited about your ideas, right? Because you're excited. And if I don't see that in your sketch, I'm not gonna be excited about your drawing. So that's my tip for you.
Thank you. It's a great kid. Good. Just sketch every damn day.
That's right. Every damn day.
Okay, thank you, Spencer, for sharing, and we'll be in touch. It has been a great experience, at least for me, and I hope for all our students and our community.
Yeah, I know I covered a bit of how to design, but hopefully that was beneficial and helped you plan your concepts out a bit better.
It was great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Spencer.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and please be welcome anytime. I hope we will have the opportunity to have you in present,
Physically.
in vivo.
Yeah, that'll be good. That'll be good. All
That
right.
would be great.
Take care.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Spencer.
Gracias a todos por estar conectados.
Gracias.
Estuvo padrísimo. Nos vemos el próximo miércoles.
Hasta luego.
Gracias.
Hasta luego, chicos. Gracias, padrísimo.
Hasta luego.
Gracias, chao.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias. Gracias.
Gracias a ustedes. Gracias a ustedes.
Bien, Gabriel.
Yeah.